Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me today on the All Things Sustainable podcast. This episode is not at all the episode that I had planned to wrap up season 4 with. We have been in a season focusing on eco-minded parenting and caretaking. All of the episodes in this season have been incredible with such amazing guest speakers, and I highly recommend that you go back and listen to any that you may have missed. And I had actually already recorded the final episode that I had planned for this season. It was just myself, as I typically do, wrapping up a season, sharing my own reflections on this topic. And in that episode in particular, I was sharing my top 3 sustainable habits that I feel like my family has personally developed with one child, and then our top 3 goals for how we wanted to continue living sustainably as we grow our family. And that episode was officially announcing our pregnancy on this show. That episode now lives on my Patreon account. If you'd ever like to see it, it's there. The Patreon link is in the show notes, patreon.com/allthingssustainable. One of the perks of being a patron of this show is that you get early access to all the episodes. But that is probably the only place that episode is going to live now, because with deepest sadness, I have to now instead record this episode where I am sharing with you all our pregnancy loss. And I've been thinking about this episode, whether or not to even record it, first of all, and if I did record it, what should the content be and what should it not include, and how do I navigate all of this, having the unique platform that I have. But throughout the entire miscarriage journey, as I thought about it, it just felt like something that we need to talk about. And I finally decided, after I realized that October is actually nationally recognized in the US as Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, that this feels like the exact time that I should be sharing an episode like this with you all. That being said, this episode is going to be very different from the usual formatting of this show. It will be by far the most vulnerable and personal episode to date. And it will be very raw because at the time of this recording, I am just sharing these thoughts only days after Finley's passing. So my hope is that somehow my own ramblings and verbal processing of this event in my life will somehow be able to help you. And if you are listening and you have experienced a pregnancy loss, or you're currently going through it, or you know someone who has, and you just want to better understand what this is like and how to be able to support your loved one, then my hope is that there will be something in this episode that resonates with you. Of course, my experiences are my own, and I can only share what it's been like for me personally. This does not universally apply, right, to all pregnancy loss stories. For example, I haven't ever experienced an ectopic pregnancy loss or a stillbirth. My pregnancy losses, I've had 2 of them now, and they were not a relief like it is for many people. Each of these pregnancies were something that we had been hoping for and planning for and counting on. So all that to say, these experiences are my own, but if there is anything that I share that can help you or resonate with you, I want to be able to share that. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to hold this space with you. So I have had 3 pregnancies now, and only one of which has given us our son, Elliot, who is about to turn 3. Some terminology right up front. So a rainbow baby, you may have heard the term. A rainbow baby is a living baby that is born after a loss, like Elliot. So our son, Elliot, is our rainbow baby. He's not really a baby anymore, but that would be the term that we use for him. And an angel baby is used to describe a pregnancy or an infant loss. So we have our rainbow baby, Elliot, and we now have 2 angel babies, Zoe and Finley. I'm going to share with you some of their stories, mostly Finley's being the most recent. I'm going to talk about the impact of pregnancy loss and the grief and some of what that process can be like for a miscarriage or a pregnancy loss. That's a term that I prefer better, and I'll get into the reasons for that later. I'm going to do my best to share the reality of this process for many people, but try to balance not sharing too much graphic detail. There is one point in this episode when I describe Finley's loss. And for listeners that may want to skip over that, if that feels like too much, this is my trigger warning for you now. You can just skip that part of the episode if you'd like. But this is important to me to share because before my first loss with Zoe, I had absolutely no idea what to expect with a miscarriage. I had no idea, no concept for what it was going to be like. And I find when I talk to other people that is all too common the case, even though statistically 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in a loss. So this is too common. It's too relatable of a topic to not be talked about and to be treated as taboo, in my opinion. And I completely understand how private and how vulnerable this experience is, and that it is not something that every person is going to want to talk about. And that is 100% okay. And I completely support that. But for those who are wanting to learn, who are wanting to understand more of what this process can be like, and for those who are willing to share their stories, that's where I want to help bridge this gap. I have this unique platform with this show, and I can share my story with thousands of listeners. So here we are. Thank you for being with me in the highs and the lows. And let's talk about pregnancy loss. First, I want to start with the joy of Finley's story. So Finley's measurable life with us was short, 8 weeks and 1 day. But the joy, the impact that he had is immeasurable and will live on forever. So we had been trying for 6 months to get pregnant again. And month after month, this year, my period would come, and it took so much effort to not get weighed down by disappointment and discouragement and fear. And then somehow, in the month of July, when I least expected to actually get pregnant, we did. But we wouldn't find that out for another month. And I actually love this part of the story. So in August, I had my very first Reiki experience. If you've never heard of Reiki, I also didn't know anything about that before. I highly recommend sometime after this episode, you go look it up. It's an incredible tool that you can use for healing, and there's not enough time to get into all of that. But anyway, I had my very first Reiki session in August on a Monday evening, and I cannot describe to you what this was like at the end, but by the end of this experience, I felt like the only way I can describe it is like this spiritual or mystical connection to my womb, my abdomen, my womb for the rest of the night. Like I just felt that there was life in there. And so the very next morning, that's what prompted me to take a pregnancy test, and it was positive. And I still was surprised. Like I felt so strongly this connection to my body and that there was life in there. And yet still, I think that part of me that was trying to like not be disappointed was still like really surprised that it actually said positive. And I cannot tell you, like, I can't accurately express the most giddy sense of joy that I felt. Like I've never had such giddiness. That is the only word that keeps coming to my mind. Such joy. In that moment, I was so excited, and I had the most fun. I had the most fun planning how to surprise Kevin, because I had never been able to do that with our previous 2 pregnancy experiences, and how to surprise our family and our friends. being able to include Elliot in the process of that was so joyful. And it is something that I will forever be thankful to have had that experience. I was absolutely thankful for each pregnancy, of course, that I've had, but Finley's experience was just very unique. It was a joy that we had never been able to feel at the beginning of our prior pregnancies. With Zoe, that was our very first pregnancy. And the moment I found out I was pregnant, I was actually just so scared. I was like consumed with fear. I was already worried I had been doing everything wrong, or I hadn't prepared my body properly. And I was excited, but I was also just really scared. And then soon after that, we found out that we were losing her, even though like we had already been pregnant for a while and I didn't know it. And so I'll get into a little bit of that story later, but we were about 10 weeks along with Zoe, but the turnaround time with us knowing and then losing her was very quick. And then with Elliot, when we found out we were pregnant with him, it was because I was in the middle of a lot of like medical complications. I was going to doctor's appointments trying to figure out something that was wrong with me, didn't know that I was pregnant. And so, of course, when I found out, then immediate fear again set in. And I was so sure that we were going to lose that pregnancy because of everything that was happening. And then miraculously, we didn't. And everything got better. And we had an incredible pregnancy and birth experience with him that I am forever thankful for. But all this to say, we had never experienced just kind of like your typical traditional, like, oh my gosh, we found out we're pregnant. We're so excited. And we get to like, I get to find a way to like surprise my husband and tell him and tell all our family. And that is what we got to experience with Finley. So this part of the story brought so much joy at first. And also another fun tidbit is that the day that we found out, so Monday evening was the Reiki session, and then Tuesday morning, I took the test, found out we were pregnant. And that happened to be August 22nd, which is National Rainbow Baby Day. So, of course, I took this as a sign that Finley was going to be another rainbow baby and that this was all going to work out. I was so sure that everything was going to be okay this time. It felt like all the signs were lining up and pointing toward a smooth and beautiful, healthy pregnancy. I was even having cravings, like that whole next month, I was having wild cravings like you typically hear with a pregnant person that I had never had before either with the other pregnancies. And it was just fun, like, craving like tons of pickles and this amazing vegan cheese and so much chocolate, like just really fun pregnancy cravings. So all this to say, over the next month, Finley brought us pure joy, pure bliss. And that is the sweetest beginning of a pregnancy that we could have asked for. And I'm so thankful for it. Then in an instant, everything changed. And the story continues to have really wild moments from here. So, like I said, we found out on a Tuesday morning, August 22nd, National Rainbow Baby Day. And the night before was a Monday, my Reiki session. Exactly 4 weeks later, on Monday night, September 18th, we found out that we had lost baby Finley. So the previous week, I had begun spotting, just lightly spotting, which, like you hear that's common when you're pregnant. And like, it doesn't always mean that there's a cause to worry. And then I eventually developed some pain, but in my lower back. And since I had abdominal cramping with Zoe's loss, I kept trying to remain positive this time and hopeful, and was convinced that it must just be a kidney stone, which is something that I experienced during my pregnancy with Elliot, which is a whole other story for another time that we don't have time to get into. But that's what I convinced myself was happening. So I even went to an ultrasound that Thursday to check on the baby, and Finley measured on track, right on schedule, 8 weeks and 1 day. And it took a long time with the ultrasound monitor machine to find the heartbeat, which was absolute torture laying on that bed and just searching for it and searching for it. But we finally, the midwife and I finally saw something that we deemed as a heartbeat, just long enough to feel like, okay, that was it, but not super positive. But then we combined that with the knowledge that the baby was measuring on track growth-wise. So we assumed things must be okay, and this is probably just a kidney stone or a UTI. So the emotions of that week, just up and down and up and down. So I left there feeling like, okay, things might be okay. But then that weekend, the pain increased, and then so did the bleeding. And then Monday morning, September 18th, exactly 4 weeks from the night that I knew that I was pregnant, my bleeding became like the flow of a normal period. It was no longer just spotting. So we decided to go back for another ultrasound that Monday night, September 18th. And not only was that exactly 4 weeks from the night that I just knew I was pregnant, it was also the 4-year anniversary of my first pregnancy loss with Zoe. 4 years on that day, we lost Zoe. And I was about 10 weeks along with Zoe. And this time with Finley, I should have been measuring nearly 9 weeks along. So it just, the connections between these two, I don't understand them. It's just the wildest coincidence. But anyway, we went into that appointment and I just had this sinking feeling that I needed to trust my body, that my body knew something was wrong before I had allowed my mind to accept it. And sure enough, we searched and we searched with that ultrasound, but we could not find a heartbeat. And then to be absolutely sure, we measured Finley and the measurements were showing 8 weeks and 1 day, which is exactly what they were the previous Thursday when I went in. So it hit me in a wave of grief. Tears just started streaming down my face as I looked at the little image on the screen. And I realized that I had seen Finley's final day of growth, final day with a heartbeat that we know of. And then he let go. And that was a gift. So the midwife stepped out to give Kevin and I some privacy in that room. And we just cried, brokenhearted together. And we tried to gather ourselves to figure out what comes next. And, my mind starts racing and jumping to all the steps ahead in an instant. All the joy and the hope and the dreams that we had were just lost in one moment. And all the fear of the pain and the grief that I knew was just beginning because I had already been there before with Zoe. All the torturous, what did I do wrongs? And how am I going to tell so-and-so? All of that ringing through my head. But what rang so loudly over and over was something that I had never had to deal with before with Zoe, which is now, how am I going to tell my toddler? How do we deliver something so heartbreaking to him in a way that he would understand, that's toddler appropriate, but wouldn't feel traumatized by? There wasn't enough time for any of that, of course. The midwife rejoined us, and now we had to just walk through the next steps, reminding ourselves of what is to come with the rest of this miscarriage process, what to expect yet again. And then, the fear kicks in. Like, over the next few days, I'm supposed to be really in tune with my body, watching for too much blood. If I soak through a pad per hour, that's too much. If I and again, I'm going to try to balance being real with you all just so that you can understand more of what this can be like, but not too graphic. So skip anything you don't want to hear. But, the next few days I needed to watch for too much blood. I needed to watch for blood clots that are larger than an egg. Both of these things mean that I need to go to an emergency room if they were to happen. I need to watch for signs of infection, like if I get a fever or chills, blood or discharge that smells foul because of the decaying process inside of me. If I have signs of infection, go to the emergency room. All of these things are something I'm supposed to be so in tune with now. And I also thoroughly remembered the process of delivering Zoe's remains at home the last time. And this is the part that I don't think many people even consider when they hear about a miscarriage or a pregnancy loss if they've never had one. I certainly never thought about this before. I just did not have anyone talking to me about it. But if you don't end up needing a medical procedure to remove the fetus from your body, then that typically means that your body is going to naturally deliver it from you. After having given birth to our son, Elliot, it was only then that I looked back on the experience I had with Zoe, and I realized that that was a mini labor and a mini birth in itself. It's exactly what that feels like. So typically the bleeding continues to increase. When your body gets close to delivering the fetus, you experience more abdominal cramping because your uterus is contracting and it's pushing everything out. So you're advised to stay home as much as you can and to get the support you need in order to do so. And then when the worst of it comes, the worst of the contracting pain and the bleeding, it usually feels like labor for a few hours. And that's a good time to just get to a toilet and just sit and wait. This is what I experienced with Zoe. Everything escalated naturally as it should over a few days, and my body actually delivered the entire gestational sac as a whole, with Zoe inside at home. That's what I assumed would happen again with Finley, and that is not what happened with Finley. So this is the part, if anybody doesn't want to know these kinds of details, just feel free to skip forward a few minutes. So let's back up a minute. So we find out that we're just over a month pregnant with Finley on August 22nd. 4 weeks later, on the 4-year anniversary of Zoe's passing, we find out that we've lost baby Finley. Then it took my body 4 more days to finally deliver the remains. And that took place on Friday, September 22nd. So exactly 1 month from the day that we found out, August 22nd, the circle of completion of delivering Finley's remains, September 22nd. Everything about this just feels wild to me. I don't understand it. It's an incredibly mystifying and confusing experience, a somehow connected series of events. I don't know what any of it means or if it means anything at all, but it just seems like Finley was meant to be for some reason. But my body did not deliver Finley naturally like it did with Zoe. For whatever reason, the bleeding and the cramping didn't increase on its own. And so when we had passed the 1 week mark where we knew Finley had stopped growing at 8 weeks and 1 day, the previous Thursday, when I got to that next Friday, my body was now at 9 weeks and 2 days of carrying Finley within me. And my midwife and I decided that it would be good to take a prescription that would help move things along, because we didn't want to risk we didn't want to risk getting infected if Finley wasn't coming out quickly enough. Not only that, I hated the waiting, just day after day after day of nothing changing quickly enough, nothing moving fast enough, the constant worry of infection lingering in the back of my mind. And then on top of that, the overwhelming sense that my body had been now hosting death within me for over a week. That was just, I couldn't shake that. And it is something that I don't know how to accurately describe. It's just an experience that I hope to never, ever go through again. So we decided to go with that prescription. Friday morning, the 22nd, I took the pills that she prescribed at 9:30 a.m. after my toddler went to school. And I was really hopeful that this would just knock things out within the few hours that he goes to school for a half day. I laid down like the instructions said to help my body absorb them. Within 2 minutes, my stomach was on fire, just like I had never experienced before. I watched TV and tried to sleep, tried to distract myself while I just waited. And To say that I was disappointed is an understatement. That it came time to pick Elliot up from school and my body had still not delivered anything. So Kevin was able to take the day off of work. He went and picked up Elliot and took care of him after that. And I just felt useless. I felt like a burden, even though Kevin has been nothing but supportive, never said anything to make me feel that way. The weight of everything that was happening all at once was just a lot to carry. He was able to pick up Elliot. When they got home, I thought maybe I could go on a walk with them since nothing was really happening other than my stomach being on fire. That really moved things along. That escalated very quickly. So within minutes of just trying to walk around our neighborhood with them, we went back home. The cramping, the contracting within my uterus was so intense. It felt like labor with Elliot, except I would actually say that this felt way worse because it didn't seem to let up. Like, at least with giving birth to Elliot, I had a fully natural birth, unmedicated and everything. But those contractions would at least like surge and then they would pause. Like there was a break. This was just like forced contracting of my uterus that was constant. So I went right back upstairs. I laid down and tried to like watch TV again and distract myself. But for the next few hours, that was incredibly intense and painful. And then finally around 7:30 p.m., I just felt the urgency to get to the bathroom. And so I stood up and I could just feel this like downward rush, like everything just starting to spill out of me. I quickly got to the toilet. And then, to spare you the too much graphic details, I needed to be there for a good long while. I called for Kevin to please like put on a TV show for Elliot downstairs and to come up and help me. And thankfully, Elliot was able to stay distracted the whole time and Kevin was able to help me. So with this medical aid, with the prescription that I took, my body did not deliver the entire gestational sac like it did with Zoe as a whole. This time I lost a lot of blood and it's hard to know exactly how much because everything was just flowing out of me. I felt incredibly sick and it took everything in me to not pass out while Kevin and I collected the remains that had passed through me into a container. It took a long time to feel like everything was complete and passed through and collected. Kevin helped me to clean up and then I just had to lay down on the bathroom floor so I wouldn't pass out and just was drinking coconut water and eating chocolate chips because Kevin, he just felt like that would be what my body would need in the moment. I couldn't tell you if that's actually what you should feed your body in an experience like that. So don't take my word as like nutritional advice at all. But he thought maybe that would help replenish some electrolytes and help my blood sugar levels. And so that's what I did. And it did seem to help. And then by 8:30 p.m., I was finally feeling enough energy back to move back into the bed. You know, Kevin helped clean everything up and said goodnight to my toddler. And since it was already dark outside, we wanted to be able to have a burial for Finley, but we just basically froze the collected remains overnight so that we could bury them the next day. And that is a choice that is deeply personal. It's not always the right thing or attainable thing for everyone. It's not what we were able to do with Zoe, but this was an important decision for us. So that's what we did. The next day, I asked Elliot if he would like to help me paint a little box so that we could put the baby back into the earth. I will share more on this later, how we navigated this whole conversation earlier in the week with him. But we painted this box. Kevin discreetly transferred all of the remains out of eyesight from Elliot so that he wouldn't see any of that. He transferred all the remains into that box that we had painted, put the lid on it. I had Elliot help me pick out some flowers from a bouquet that a friend had sent us. We cut some flowers. He picked one for himself, one for daddy, one for mommy. And then together we all walked outside and we had just a quiet corner of our backyard with a tree that we decided would be a good resting place. So Together, we dug the little grave. Elliot wanted to help with his shovel, so he brought his little shovel over, and we placed the box inside the soil. We each placed our little flowers around it, and Elliot also wanted to add in some pine cones, so we decorated with pine cones. And then Kevin and I read just a small note and put that note into the ground as well with the box. And then we gently returned the soil to its place and covered everything up. Kevin formed the pine needles into a heart around the site, and Elliot and I arranged some pine cones around this big rock that he had found on top of the site. So it was really beautiful. It was heart-wrenching and healing at the same time. It brought us a lot of closure, I think, much more than we were able to do with Zoe. And I know that this situation isn't possible for everyone or may not feel right for everyone, but I was really thankful for this opportunity to give Finley sort of like a ceremony and to bring us that sense of closure. Okay. If you are still with me at this point in the episode, I hope that that means that something is resonating with you. I hope that you either feel less alone if you're going through this, or that maybe you feel a deeper sense of understanding of what pregnancy loss can be like for someone that you know. The thing is, early pregnancy loss is classified as any miscarriage 12 weeks and under. But in a typical 37 to 40 week pregnancy, 12 weeks and under, that's a significant amount of time and growth that has already passed. For many pregnancies, just for context, for many pregnancies between 10 and 12 weeks, a medical procedure is needed to remove the fetus because it's already too much for the body to pass alone. In my two experiences personally, as I've shared here, around 10 weeks the first time and just over 8 weeks the second time, my body was able to deliver them, but not without noticeable, distinguishable factors of growth that we could see in the delivery. And then for many of those who lose their pregnancies even earlier than 8 weeks, it can be likened to having a very heavy, very intense period for a long amount of time. My point overall is that for every comment from someone who is ignorant to these experiences, whether they are well-meaning or not, comments like, well, at least your loss was early, or why is it such a big deal when the fetus wasn't even fully grown? Just stop. Just don't say it. This is not comforting in the slightest. Even comments like, well, there must have been something wrong, so it's a good thing that your body got rid of it for you. I've gotten that comment. These comments hurt. They don't help, at least in my experience. That's how I feel about it. Because we being anyone who has actually gone through this, we already know something was wrong. We don't need you to say that. And we know that this baby was in the early stages of developing. It doesn't mean that our hopes and our dreams were in the early stages of developing. No matter how long or how little a pregnancy lasted, if this pregnancy was desired, then there was so much more that was lost than the fetus alone. And even if the pregnancy wasn't desired, I have heard from many people that the physical, mental, and emotional toll that the entire miscarriage process takes on your body, that is enough to leave a lasting impact in itself. It's been a few days since losing Finley that I'm recording this, and my body is still sore. It's still exhausted. It's still cramping intermittently, and it's still bleeding. The amount is decreasing each day, but all of this is still happening for me. What I'm saying is that no part of this experience is a small deal. Biologically and psychologically, this is typically a traumatizing event in some way. While we're at it, let's go ahead and talk about the term miscarriage. I have come to hate this term, and I try to use it as little as possible. I prefer to use the term pregnancy loss instead. Miscarriage seems to imply that something was done wrong. Like when you misinterpret someone, or you made a mistake, you misunderstand, you misspell, misuse, mislead, mismanage. The miss in miscarriage implies that you miscarried your baby. You did something wrong. And again, this is my personal preference, but ever since I've shared my story with my first loss with Zoe, I have heard countless stories from people who have experienced pregnancy loss as well. And one of the most common things that we can all relate to is the torture of the whole, what did I do wrong? And the constant searching for a why that makes sense, even though most of us don't usually find one. I have a million little reasons that I've come up with for why I might have lost Zoe or might have lost Finley. None of them are for sure. None of them actually help me feel better. And I know that there are tests out there that can help to determine possible causes. I did check all my blood work after losing Zoe to see if I could adjust anything medically or nutritionally for my next pregnancy. And I think these are very helpful tools, but I can't allow myself to constantly wonder why and to constantly try to figure out what exactly I might have done wrong. The sad reality is, for whatever reasons, pregnancy loss is something that 1 in 4 pregnant people will endure. I hate it. I want to change it. And I will continue to do everything I possibly can to prepare my body for a healthy pregnancy, hopefully in the future. And I hope others will experience that too. But I cannot hold myself or others in a continuous state of guilt when the grief is heavy enough. So when I share my experiences, I carefully use the term pregnancy loss because that's what it was. Okay, we are going to eventually bring this in for a close, you all. I'm going to share a few more things. I mentioned grief. I want to talk about grief, and then I want to talk about support. So grief is a heavy burden to carry, and the way that each person carries it is not always going to be the same. We may follow the typical phases of grief, sure, but even these don't always come and go at the same time or look the same for each person. Grief is deeply personal. I want to share a little bit of what my grief journey has looked like just in the 4 days of waiting between finding out that we lost Finley to actually delivering the remains at home. This in no way could possibly capture the countless tears that have been shared and the overwhelming weight of all of it. But if it helps for you to have a snapshot of this grief, to find that you're not alone, or to possibly understand someone else grieving in your life, then I have just like a few snippets of some journal entries from those couple of days of waiting. So on September 19th, the day after we learned we had lost Finley, I wrote, I'm having a really hard time waiting, just waiting, holding this death inside me and waiting for it to pass through me. There's no escaping it. Every single trip to the bathroom and seeing my own blood is a blunt reminder. Every twinge and throb of pain. I don't want to do anything. I just want to cry and grieve and sit. And at the same time, I feel like I need to speed the process up. Like I can't just sit and wait for who knows how long. I know I can trust my body, but I hate every minute of the waiting. The dread of knowing what's coming, having been here before, feels harder to hold. It's going to take a long while for life to not feel overcome by grief once again. And that waiting scares me too. On September 20th, I wrote, I want to break things. I want to scream until I can't breathe. I can't seem to cry enough. I'm so angry and so incredibly sad. This is so much harder in some ways going through this loss with a toddler this time. On the one hand, I'm even more deeply grateful to have him. He's a miracle. I'm soaking up and breathing in every embrace, every word, every cool trick that he wants to show me. And we're also navigating the conversations of death and loss and grief together. It's not only my dreams and Kevin's that are being shattered this time. Elliot talks about how the baby is gone now and how big brothers are the best and how he wants to help pat the baby and snuggle the baby and how he wants to have 2 babies next time with blue and green hair. There's so much loss here. It's such a painful layer of depth. And I'm learning in the moment how to balance my emotions with his, how much of mine to show him, And in my breaking moments where I feel like I've held too much in and then all my grief comes roaring out in a way that feels directed toward him, then I'm broken again. I don't know how to navigate this. I don't even know if I can handle trying again. Putting us all through this experience again, how could I even be happy if I were to find out that we were pregnant again in the future? It's 15 steps ahead, I know, but my mind races there. This one body, this one womb has held 3 lives and 2 deaths. The same womb for 3 different babies. What changes? And is it right to try and host another life in the same place? And the final snippet I'll share with you from the day before we passed Finley's remains, September 21st, I shared, I don't want to sleep. I keep fighting it every night, keep trying to cope with distraction. If I sleep, I have to wake up to the reality of waiting an entire day again that much sooner. Not knowing what's going to happen next for hours on end, everything feels on hold. I don't know how to focus on work or texting people back or cooking or anything. I'm going through the motions of the things that I have to do each day, all the while trying to push the all-consuming thoughts of holding death within me and just aching for it to be over, fully over. And then there's the fear of infection, fear of needing a procedure for removal, fear of pain and excessive bleeding, constantly being on watch for all of these things, trying to read my body's signs all day long. It's exhausting, but I can't sleep. I was, and I am, so angry, and it comes in waves. Anger, overwhelming sadness, heartbreak. For the past 2 weeks, I've just wanted to be alone. I haven't wanted to see or talk with nearly anyone, just wanted to sit in the depths of sadness. I'm exhausted and I'm just now beginning to come out of this hole. And it's very, very hard to show up when most people around you are still living their best lives and carrying on with each day seemingly lighter than what you're feeling. We have been endlessly grateful for the community that has already wrapped themselves around us in this season, and that they've been able to do so in ways that honor our wishes to grieve alone right now, while still feeling their immense love and support from a distance. I'm going to share some of these examples with you and how they've supported us in a few minutes so that you might have some ideas as well. But right now, if you're listening to this and you find yourself reflected here at all in my story, please know that you're not alone. As my friend empathized with me the other day, the process of going through a pregnancy loss is, quote, a cruel torture for something so utterly heartbreaking. Unfair isn't big enough of a word. And she also encouraged me just by seeing this part of the process too, because she's been there. She said, I can imagine you've had a hell of a day, my brave friend. Brave when there was no other choice but to be strong and brave. So I share with you, dear listener, if you have gone through this, you're currently going through this pregnancy loss, you are so brave. You are strong. You are stronger than you think. None of this means that you won't absolutely break down or feel crushed by the weight of all of your grief. No, that is normal and that is okay. You are okay. This is an impossibly difficult situation to navigate, and you're going to make it through this. I don't know what your future holds. I don't know what my future holds. I don't know what further heartbreaks and heartwarming moments are going to lie ahead, but I know that you are doing the best that you know how to do. Keep taking one day, 1 hour, one breath at a time. This is hard. There is no right way to grieve. There is no right way to feel. You are doing your best. So I want to bring this episode in for a close by sharing with you all some of the ways that my husband and I have cared for ourselves and each other, as well as our toddler now. And I want to share some ideas for anyone listening who hasn't personally gone through this loss, but wants to support a loved one who has. Again, all of these things come from my personal experiences. They do not universally apply. So take what feels right and applicable to you, and then feel free to leave the rest. So the first piece of support that I could share with you is to take some time and space. Take as much as you can This looks different for everyone. With Zoe, for example, I had to work all the way through the loss. I went home in the middle of my shift. I just had to leave when I could tell that things were really ramping up. And I got home just in time to sit in the bathroom and deliver the remains of Zoe. I think I took a day or two off of work and then I had to go right back into it all. With Finley this time around, I have had the privilege of being able to work for myself and work from home. And I've continued to work on all of the things that need to get done. Then I've been able to cancel as many meetings as possible that could wait until later. The Monday through Friday of losing Finley, I didn't work at all. I didn't want to see anyone or talk to anyone. I allowed myself space for the sadness, and I'm really thankful that I could do that. So whatever this might look like for you, I encourage you to give yourself some time and some space to be alone or be with someone that you feel safe with, and hold space for all these emotions because they are important. Another recommendation to support yourself is to memorialize your loss in some way. And I know that this is a deeply personal choice. Again, take what feels right for you. There is no right way to grieve or to memorialize your loss and to bring closure, but these are some of the ideas that have helped me or people I know. So the first is, if you're able to, name your baby. It has been so incredibly healing for my husband and I to be able to refer to our pregnancy losses by name rather than just saying like the baby all the time or it. You know, with both of them, they were 10 weeks and 8 weeks-ish. So we didn't know exactly the gender, but the first loss felt like a girl, and we chose the name Zoe because Zoe means life. And that was significant for us for our first time being pregnant, our first loss. And then with Finley, we had the name Finley picked out for months and months. We knew as we were trying to get pregnant that the next baby we were going to have was going to be named Finley. And I, of course, envisioned raising Finley for their entire life. And I wanted that. I really wanted to have a living child named Finley. But we've been attached to this name for so long, and we had been calling the baby within me Finley for so long that it didn't feel right to give that name to anybody else. So we landed on sticking with the name Finley. It means courageous one. And that name has become so fitting for this whole situation. So Zoe and Finley, it's helpful to be able to refer to those losses by name if that's something that resonates with you. If it's possible for you to do something like providing a burial, like we were able to do with Finley, that can be incredibly healing. If that's not possible, you know, you could put together something like a shadow box. My friend sent me a beautiful picture of a shadow box that she and her husband have at their home, with little like just mementos and meaningful pieces of imagery and things that related to that pregnancy, the cremated remains of their baby. That could be something that's an option for you to hang up in your home. You could do something as simple as painting a rock and placing that somewhere in your home, outside, on your porch. You could plant a tree or just have a household plant that you designate in their honor. This was something that I did with Zoe. The first loss, I got a tattoo, and I'm already thinking about adding to it for Finley. So I got, you know, a tattoo that represents just a sprout of growth. Didn't develop into a full beautiful plant, but it was a sprout of growth, and it's a very meaningful tattoo in Zoe's honor, and I'll figure out something to add for Finley as well. And then another idea for, you know, some sort of memorial or tribute, if you want to acknowledge that day of passing each year, you know, like with Zoe's, and now from this point forward with Finley's days, we're going to light a candle, and we typically bake something special. We commemorate that day and we honor it as a family, whether you want to call it the anniversary of their passing or their birthday, because like we talked about before, it really is like a mini birth. That could be a way to honor that day and that heartache. Some ideas for supporting yourselves and another child, if you have another child or more at home with you in this time of loss. This adds an additional layer of grief and heartache. Although you may feel so extra lucky to have them and you may take comfort in that, it's no less heartbreaking to have to explain this experience if you choose to do so. You may not want to, and that's okay. But if you choose to explain this to your child and you have to regulate both their emotions and your own, that's a lot to have to handle. Our birth center recommended the book called There Was a Baby by Laura Camerona. She's a certified specialist helping children to cope during stressful life events, and the book is written appropriate for ages 1 through 11. We've been very thankful for its language and its beautiful illustrations as a guide with our nearly 3-year-old through these conversations. We've had many discussions in the past couple weeks around the baby dying in mommy's belly, and we read that it's good at this age to use specific words like dying or death rather than something ambiguous like the baby's just gone or the baby is lost, because they can't conceptualize that and it might create more fear in them. So we've had discussions around how the baby that was in mommy's belly, we named them Finley, and the baby died. The baby stopped growing, and we don't know why, but that's what happened. And we talked to him after the fact when I had delivered Finley, how we said, the baby came out of mommy and we're going to put him back in the earth. And, we didn't have him see any of that, any of the graphic reality of it, but having him be part of painting the little box, cutting the flowers and all of that, he was able to conceptualize with us putting this item back into the earth and recognizing that that's where its home is now. And I think that closure really helped. We've talked about how he's still a big brother and that baby will always be part of our family. And we hope to bring another baby home to live with us one day. So having these conversations daily for the past couple of weeks has brought up a range of emotions within me. Sometimes I'm able to handle it really calmly, and other days it's too much and I'm so sad. And I've had to balance how much of that sadness I want him to see, because I think it's important for him to still see these emotions and to recognize that mommy and daddy can be sad and he can be sad too. And this is all okay. And we're here for each other. I highly recommend the emotional check-in posters and tools from The Peaceful Mother. If you look up her website and her social media, The Peaceful Mother, she has so many resources for helping your children to become emotionally intelligent and regulated. But her printables on her website are really helpful. We have a little emotional check-in corner now of our home. And it's been so helpful in this phase to be able to go over there to that corner with Elliot and to look at the posters on the wall and identify visually, here's how I'm feeling. And he'll ask me now, Mommy, how are you feeling? And he'll tell me how he's feeling. And then there's posters that have a lot of ideas of what you might need to help you regulate. So that's been a really incredible tool if you want to check that out. And lastly, you may need to rely extra heavily on TV time or something mellow that allows your child to be entertained while you give yourself a breather. It's okay. I know that this is hard and this likely isn't the routine that you're used to, but it's not going to last forever. This is a season where you need to care for yourself in order to be fully present and care for your kids. So you may need to rely on that, and that's okay. Give yourself a break. Give yourself some grace. Speaking of that, self-care, self-care. Rely on that as much as you possibly can. I know this looks different for everybody, but ideas to just throw out there, therapy, talking with close friends and family, some sense of community, seeking that out. If you need time alone, recognize that. Ask for help when you need it in order to give yourself some time alone. even if it's just for a few minutes a day. Journaling or creating some form of artwork might be very cathartic. Going to a session like Reiki or yoga might have you very connected to your body, and maybe you need that. It's incredibly important for you to rest right now. I'm preaching to the choir. I'm telling myself this. You just went through an incredibly traumatic event, physically and emotionally, and all the things, and you need time to heal. Comfort foods can be really, really helpful in that time. But of course, eat all the chocolate cake that your heart desires right now, but remember to nourish your body because you have been through something so taxing. So remember to drink your water, remember to eat your veggies, all those things. If you need a good cry, try listening to the song Bigger Than the Whole Sky by Taylor Swift. I'm not even like a huge Swiftie or something, but I had never heard this song in the context of pregnancy loss before, but now I'm convinced that has to be what she wrote it for. She's never, that I know of, come out and said that she's experienced that, but the lyrics are so very spot on. I don't know how she could have written it if she didn't go through something like this, but it's been so validating and so healing, and it's a beautiful song. So if you need to just cry, that might be something that you can go listen to on repeat if you need it. Try to be proactive as much as you can with your partner or your support team, whatever that looks like for you. When you're in moments of feeling calm and grounded, maybe make a plan with those support people for how to help you in the moments where you are not going to be emotionally regulated or emotionally steady. Grieving is a process that takes a long time. And like we talked about, it will look different for everybody. So coming up with a sort of proactive plan can be really, really helpful. It's easy to take out your heavy emotions on the people closest to you when those heat of the moment times come. Kevin and I have already walked through a lot of that this week. So again, having some sort of communication or plan to lay the foundation for those moments can be really, really helpful so that it doesn't feel like absolutely everything is falling apart. Okay, support partners. This is where I'm wrapping up the episode, really. I'm turning to you now. These are some ideas for helping your loved ones when they're grieving. The thing is, you know your loved ones best. So out of all the ideas that I could share, you need to first respect the wishes of whatever it is that they are asking for, and then take my ideas and figure out how it might be able to be changed or applied to the ones that you love. Because this time around, we were asking friends and family for time and space for us to grieve alone for a while. We had a handful of people who just delivered homemade meals, left them on our porch, and just texted and said, hey, this is there when you need it. We had a handful of people give us gift cards, whether physically on the porch or in our inbox, digitally, Grubhub or DoorDash. Meals have been so very helpful in this phase because it can take so much energy to even figure out, like, what am I going to cook? I have to go to the grocery store, and this is just too much right now. So don't underestimate the healing power of food and childcare. If your loved one has kids and they may want some help with childcare, always ask. Maybe they don't want that, but that's another really helpful way to offer some support. We've received some beautiful gifts like flowers or plants, cookies, just little gifts left on the porch that people have just shown that they care and that they love us and they're thinking of us. And that's meant so much. Maybe, again, you need to know your person best, but maybe you could ask them when they're ready. You can take them to one of those rage rooms where you can buy a ticket to safely break things in a contained environment and let out some of that anger. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but honestly, sometimes in the grieving process, when you're just so filled with anger and you want to break things, like, it's not a bad idea. And then lastly, texting or calling, whatever you know that your person prefers, check in with them. And don't forget about them, because grieving takes many forms for a long time. Like we've said so much in this episode. Maybe put reminders on your phone if you need to, but just check in with them from time to time. Ask them how they're really doing. Ask them what they need, and just be there to listen, because it's not your job to try to make them happy. That's something that I feel like so many well-intending people in my previous experiences have tried to do, but sometimes I don't want to be happy. Like, this is a really traumatic, hard thing that I'm going through and that I'm processing. And sometimes I just want to be sad, or I want to be angry, and I want to be with somebody who feels safe to do that with. So don't take on the pressure or the responsibility of making that person happy. Just listen to them, just be with them. And it's a really great way to love them. Okay, this episode was hard. It was hard for me to share. I can only imagine how hard it may have been to listen to. And I don't even know, honestly, how long it's been. I am going to have to figure this out and edit this episode. But thank you for being here. If you are still here, no matter how much of the episode you did or didn't listen to, thank you for leaning into a really uncomfortable topic. I'm incredibly thankful to you all for holding space with me in my grief, for listening to my stories, and for simply being here. It means the world to me. Thank you for showing up for yourself. If you have experienced pregnancy loss and you needed to find a sense of community in the midst of what can be a highly isolating experience, I can only hope that that is what you found here. And I'm sending you the warmest hugs and all of my love, and my heart grieves with yours. Thank you for showing up. If you haven't experienced a pregnancy loss, but you want to support someone who has, we need people like you in our lives. We need those friends who are with us through the highs and the lows, who don't shy away from the sorrows, and who just want to love us well. Thank you for supporting that person in need in your life. You may just be keeping them afloat. I'm always learning more, and I would love to hear if you have more ideas for supporting someone through this kind of loss that I did not share, or if you experienced something that I haven't that would be helpful to share. All of my contact information is in the episode description. And finally, if this episode helped you in any way, I would be so appreciative if you could share it somewhere. Share it with a friend who may need to be supported as well. Share it on your social media for anyone who may just be suffering silently. Share it with your community if you don't have the bandwidth to list what you need as you grieve, because I've already done so much of the heavy lifting in this conversation. You can just pass that along to them as a resource. Share it wherever you can, and I hope that together we can make this awful, awful grieving process a little bit easier on as many people as possible. I'm sending each one of you the most heartfelt love and gratitude. This is the official closing of season 4 on the show, but we will be back in a little while with more supporting content on what it looks like to live sustainably. And until then, I love you all, and I will be with you sometime soon.